Chapter 4, Bowen Goes for Broke. Major General Ulysses Grant's Army of the Tennessee captured the Mississippi state capital at Jackson on May 14, and then turned west to attack the fortress at Vicksburg. At the same time, a Confederate army, commanded by Lieutenant General John Pemberton, marched southeast, planning to force the Union Army to attack them at a spot of their choosing. But Pemberton's march southeast was delayed, and Grant's army caught them in the open on the morning of May 16 near Champion Hill. The map you're looking at is adapted from one that I found in the Atlas to the Official Records, published by the Government Printing Office in the 1890s. Edwards is on the left edge, Bolton on the right edge. It's about 10 miles between the two. Baker's Creek runs from the northeast corner to the southwest corner in a loop, and the crossroads is here. The little rectangles on the map are infantry brigades. My guess is the Union brigades, in blue, were about 3,000 men each. The Confederate brigades, in gray, were about 5,000 men each. Ron Chernow, in his 2017 biography titled Grant, puts the size of the two armies at 29,000 versus 20,000, with Grant's Union Army outnumbering Pemberton's Confederate Army. And if you buy those numbers, Grant had a huge advantage. His army was 45% larger than Pemberton's. But Grant also had better information about the enemy and was a better battlefield commander. Grant knew the Confederates were in his front, and his army attacked along the three roads here. The strongest attack struck the Confederate left flank on the Jackson Road. That attack split Pemberton's army here and cut their line of retreat, which was here. This was an emergency for the Confederates. General Pemberton, when he woke that morning, thought Grant's army was still attacking Jackson, 25 miles to the east. And then he found himself under attack. The Union attack developed so quickly that Pemberton had no chance to prepare for a battle. And now Pemberton needed to find troops to reinforce his left flank. But there was no reserve he could call up in an emergency, so Pemberton is looking for help. Beginning about 11:30 or noon, he started calling for Brigadier General John Bowen's and Major General William Loring's divisions to move north and support his left flank. As described in Chapter 3, Bowen and Loring at first refused Pemberton's commands. Then eventually they started to move north. As of 2 p.m., only Bowen's division has arrived. There are two brigades in Bowen's division, commanded by Colonel Francis Cockrell and Brigadier General Martin Greene. And see Cockrell's and Greene's brigades here. Warren Grabow, in his book 98 Days, described Cockrell's brigade as Cockrell's Dower, Missouri Infantry, and wrote that they were deeply respected. Dower is not a word we run across very often. I found a definition online. Relentlessly severe, stern, or gloomy in manner or appearance. For example, a hard, dour, humorless fanatic. I always thought it was pronounced dour, but the internet says it's dour. Warren Grabow described their commander, Colonel Cockrell, as a notably bellicose type. When his brigade was formed up in line of battle and ready to move forward, Colonel Cockrell rode down the lines, holding his reins and a large magnolia flower in one hand, and waving his sword with the other, and gave the order to charge. Timothy Smith wrote in his book Champion Hill that an officer watching them start off turned to General Alfred Cumming, who commanded a brigade in Stevenson's division, and asked what command that was moving to the front. And General Cumming replied, "They're Missourians going to their death." In about 30 minutes of fighting, Bowen's division, again, two brigades, Cockrell's and Greene's brigades, opened a hole in the Union line, thoroughly alarmed General Grant, and prompted Grant to scramble for reinforcements. The obvious Union response was to strike from the east along the middle road and hit the Confederate attack in the flank. This would be 2 divisions from Major General John McClernand's corps, which were supposedly attacking along the middle road, but the Confederates appeared to have no concern about anything to their east on the middle road. Grant needed help. Where were McClernand's 2 divisions on the middle road? Grant was only 1.5 miles from McClernand's position on the middle road, and more messages were sent asking McClernand to attack immediately. Warren Grabow writes that apparently with Confederate troops on Bowles Hill, the courier had to travel around to the east on Jackson Road and then cut south cross-country over difficult terrain to reach McClernand's headquarters. So McClernand's headquarters and travel time, according to Grabow, was 30 minutes or more away from Grant. The book, The Vicksburg Campaign, edited by Stephen Woodworth and Charles Greer, has an essay in it by Michael Ballard, and in this essay, Ballard suggests that McClernand, understanding that he was not popular with Grant, and with orders calling for caution, decided he must be cautious. And then Ballard provides this analysis. Grant later strongly criticized McClernand for holding back, but the charge is disingenuous. By riding with McPherson, rather than placing himself between the 2 corps, Grant cut himself off from communicating effectively with McClernand. Ballard says McClernand got word of Union success on the Confederate left too late to coordinate with Major General James McPherson. Yes, McClernand could have moved faster, but he isn't the only one to blame, according to Ballard. Timothy Smith wrote that at this point Grant had engaged 5 Union brigades totaling about 10,000 men against Stevenson's Confederate division of about 6,500 men, which is about a 50% advantage to Grant's Union troops. When Bowen's division joined the fight, Smith says the numbers of troops engaged flipped to about even, except that Bowen's troops were fresh and well organized, while Grant's troops had been in heavy action for 2 hours or more and were winded and disorganized. So the advantage now flips to the Confederates, but the advantage might be temporary because Grant has reinforcements approaching on the Jackson Road. Bowen's attack pushed Hovey's Union division back. Bowen's division regained the crossroads and pushed Hovey's 2 brigades up onto Champion Hill. Off to Bowen's left, both Barton and Lee's Confederate brigades reformed, joined the counterattack, and pushed back against Logan's division, trying to protect the flank of Bowen's breakthrough. Grant's reserves were Crocker's division, and now they're starting to arrive on the north side of Champion Hill. Sanborn's brigade arrived first and were sent to the Union right to help Stevenson's brigade. When Sanborn's brigade arrived, 2 of their regiments were told to support an artillery battery, and then later, Sanborn's brigade was asked to return to the Union left with the remaining 2 regiments to support Hovey's division. When Cockrell's brigade reached the summit of Champion Hill, they stopped for a moment to reorganize before taking on the fresh brigades they could see approaching from the north. Runners were sent back for more ammunition. According to Timothy Smith, every man in Bowen's division carried 40 rounds in his cartridge box, but the fighting was so intense that Bowen's men ended up firing off between 75 to 90 rounds. The extra 35 to 50 rounds came from scavenging the battlefield, taking ammunition from dead and wounded soldiers. The runners set off to get fresh ammunition, returned with the news that the wagons had left the field, and the wagon train included the wagons in Bowen's division train, which carried their ammunition. So no ammunition was available. Bowen's infantry could see the Union Army wagon train in front of them, about 500 yards away. There was more ammunition there, but they couldn't reach it. Boomer's Union Brigade followed Sanborn's brigade and deployed on the west side of the road. Together, they were able to slow, but not stop, Bowen's advance. According to Warren Grabow, Hovey's artillery, off to Boomer's left, now began to play on Bowen's division, and more on that artillery in a moment. As Bowen's attack gathered steam, according to Grabow, Grant was shaken. Holmes's brigade was still about 30 minutes away. If the combination of Boomer's brigade and Sanborn's 2 regiments, plus the artillery, didn't stop the attack, Grant could lose his wagon train and his Union army might be cut in 2. General Pemberton knew Bowen's attack would need support. According to Timothy Smith in his book, The Inland Campaign for Vicksburg, back at the Roberts House, Pemberton was casting longing glances down the Ratliff Road and asking, "Where is Loring?" Loring's division was coming, but they were late in starting. Pemberton got word that a brigade of Federal troops had taken the summit of Bowles Hill here, and it seemed there were more troops behind them, and Pemberton saw Bowen's predicament, attacked in his front and also now on both flanks. Pemberton continued sending couriers to General Loring with orders to march Buford and Featherston's brigades to the north, and to leave Tillman's brigade behind to cover Raymond Road and the bridge. But Loring refused to budge. General Loring claimed he was facing a Federal corps on the Raymond Road, and that they might go on the offensive at once. Loring was right. He was facing both A.J. Smith and Blair's divisions, but Loring's front was quiet. Pemberton saw the larger situation, and Loring did not. As Timothy Smith wrote in his book Champion Hill, orders to move were orders to move. The officer carrying the orders was Major Jacob Thompson, and in his report, he writes that he told Loring, if he did not comply with the order, the responsibility was Loring's, not Thompson's. This is a continuation of the controversy described in Chapter 3, where both Generals Bowen and Loring refused to send troops north to support Stevenson's division. Now, General Bowen has responded. His division counterattacked and recovered the crossroads, but General Loring continued to delay. Loring's division has 3 brigades, Buford, Featherston, and Tillman. Finally, Loring followed Pemberton's orders, and maybe about the time that Bowen's counterattack started, first Buford's brigade and then Featherston's began marching north to support Bowen's division. As I said earlier, Crocker's Union division was able to slow but not stop Bowen's advance. Stephen Smith wrote that the tide of battle at this point was turning against the Federals, but 2 things happened. One was that Division Commander Brigadier General Hovey organized a collection of artillery, maybe as many as 16 guns, on a knob northeast of the crossroads, and they began to play heavily on Bowen's infantry. The writers are unclear about where this artillery was placed, but Timothy Smith specifies that it included the 6th Wisconsin and the 16th Ohio, and in Warren Grabow's maps, those 2 units are placed here. And see that they're within a mile of Bowen's Confederate infantry and perfectly placed to deliver enfilading fire. The second thing that happened was that the last of Crocker's 3 brigades, Holmes's brigade, arrived. Timothy Smith described Bowen's predicament. In effect, Bowen had bored a hole into the Federal Army right along the Jackson Road, retaking the crossroads. But Federals elsewhere had not withdrawn in response, and the result was Bowen being stuck way out into the Federal Army in a bulge, while both his flanks were open, and Federals actually dominated the ground in rear of both of those flanks. Bowen continued forward and pushed both Sanborn and Boomer's brigades back, but Logan's Union division on the west and Holmes's fresh Union brigade on the east began to pinch in on the flanks of Bowen's penetration, and Osterhaus's Union division now, finally, began to close in from the east. Osterhaus was advancing up the middle road in Bowen's rear and on his right flank. The high point of Bowen's attack was about here, after 3 p.m. Timothy Smith described the moment. Nearly surrounded and pushed back at the front, Bowen, logically, started the long retrograde back toward the crossroads. General Greene loudly proclaiming, he never would have been driven back but for the fact that he had not a cartridge left. Warren Grabow wrote that General Bowen called for help, and Grabow could not resist commenting. Now Bowen, who had allowed Carter Stevenson's division to be destroyed while he pursued his personal vendetta against Pemberton, ignoring the latter's orders, now found himself in an identical position, waiting for Loring's division to arrive. He called for help, just as Stevenson before him had done. It would have made a good title for a Victorian melodrama, The Betrayer Betrayed. Major Samuel Lockett, Pemberton's engineer, later wrote, Bowen's division sustained its reputation by making one of its grand old charges, in which it bored a hole through the Federal Army, and finding itself unsupported, turned around and bored its way back again. Buford's Confederate brigade from Loring's division arrived, coming up from the south, but it was too little and too late. By the time they were deployed on the west side of the road, Crocker's Union division had arrived and pushed south, and Carr and Osterhaus's Union divisions were, finally, pushing west down the middle road. Bowen's division broke before Buford's brigade had a chance to deploy, and the crossroads were retaken by Union troops. One of Loring's brigades, that's Buford's brigade, has come up and deployed late, but there are 3 brigades in Loring's division, where was General Loring and the rest of his division. In the next part, General Pemberton rides south looking for Loring, sees the Raymond Road unguarded, and realizes the rear of his army is open to a Federal attack.